We have a crisis in this country, folks. And I know that's very vague because people say, well, what crisis are you talking about? Like, this is Canada. We're a crisis on top of crisis. It's a crisis parfait, if you will, like a layered cake. But specifically, I want to talk about crime because let's face it, crime is running amok. We have shown numerous instances of, crimes being committed that they get, bailed out immediately, that these are repeated offenders, nothing's being done. They're being, this catch and release style initiative is just completely lacking and is failing communities. And the fact that people that were trying to self-defend themselves from home intrusions, they're the ones being penalized. The whole entire system is another joke. And we see people like Doug Ford that go on camera. They talk about this. They know that there's a problem, but they're not willing to actually call for action. They're not willing to actually lift a finger. And Doug Ford will just go, well, someone should do something about this, like a cartoon character. But it seems like something could be potentially stirring within the federal side of things. Here's what went down. So, from the CBC, conservatives, liberals spar over competing versions of bail reform. Opposition includes motion proposing 3 strikes crime law. Now, I think this is kind of almost similar to what Bill Clinton had in the 90s, where, the mass incarceration bill in 1994, it was kind of described as the 3 strikes, you're out law. But we know that that provision, specifically in the United States, they were trying to cover that up. There was a lot of malfeasance. They were trying to, penalize people so that private prison can get more prisoners in its facilities to then use for private prison labor. We know about, the backstory about that. Not saying that the conservatives are doing the same thing, but just want to compare that to how the United States enacted their 3 strikes law. That was kind of corrupted with the private prison industry. And I don't think that's what Pierre Poilievre and the conservatives are trying to do with this, but you have to look for yourselves upon that. So it goes on to say the conservatives and liberal MPs spar Thursday in the House of Commons over reforms to Canada's bail system as the official opposition emphasizes crime earlier in the fall sitting. The Conservatives introduced a motion calling on the Liberal government to implement a 3 strikes and you're out law aimed at stopping criminals convicted of serious offenses from getting bail, probation, parole, or house arrest. It comes in advance of an expected Liberal legislation to tighten bail provisions. Justice Minister Sean Fraser has said criminal justice legislation will be tabled this fall. The conservative bill seeks bail reforms that would keep violent criminals convicted of 3 offenses in for at least 10 years. Increasingly, people feel endangered in their own communities, said opposition leader Pierre Poilievre, speaking in the House days after his first appearance since winning the Battle River Crowfoot by-election. Poilievre listed several cases of people across the country who committed severe crimes while out on release. Under the catch-and-release liberal justice system, all this happened as a direct result of liberal laws that turn criminals loose on our streets so they can offend and re-offend with no consequences, he said. So, then they go on to say, so 2019 is the last time they had a reform to the Criminal Act. So, Poilievre has been pitching a 3-strike rule since the election campaign. Conservatives frequently target the previous Liberal government's Bill C-5, which expanded the availability of conditional sentences, allowing some convicted criminals to serve time under house arrest. But on Thursday, Poilievre homed in on the 2019 Liberal crime legislation, Bill C-75. In particular, the principle of restraint in the bill, which ensures release at the earliest opportunity, is favored over detention and requires reasonable bail conditions. So, this was what they were proposing in 2019. This is what Justin Trudeau was trying to reform the crime bill to make it easier for bail to consist, that people can go on bail, that there wouldn't be harshness on them, and the opportunity of release was more favorable in that direction than detention, which I see why people may look at that this way. I could see the argument of saying that, yes, locking people away, wasting taxpayer money on, non-violent criminals, let's just say. Like, if you're arrested for possession of narcotics, if you will, like you were just holding a bag for someone, and you're a non-violent criminal, you did your time, you aren't a threat to anybody, I could see the argument for this. But over time, this particular bill, and this is what's so uniquely about this country, is that when a bill gets proposed and brought to the table, it's not actually what they're proposing. It's not actually what comes out on the streets. Like, what's on paper is not interpreted of the actions that are happening right in your own backyard. Just like how we know Bill C-11 and all the censorship bills or the Online Harms Act, when it looks like on paper that's only directed to certain individuals that are spreading, violent rhetoric and going after those people, we know that in reality, everybody has a target, that they're going after everybody because they're trying to overreach the situation because other people are corroded and corrupted into making this bill and formulating it into their own ways to implement their own agenda into this. And we know that the establishment thrives on chaos. They thrive on, sowing division and crime on the streets, and people getting paranoid, people getting freaked out. So it would not surprise me if this was drafted, people looked at this and said, okay, well, if it's for nonviolent criminals, I can maybe see the point of this. But as time went on, donors talked to each other, you get lobbyists talking directly to the prime minister and the cabinets, and we know how corrupted our parliament is. That's not what's happening. And what we're seeing is this catch and release of violent criminals, repeated violent criminals, that are making neighborhoods less and less safe. And the people that are trying to be the most vigilant in their neighborhoods are the ones getting convicted and the ones getting attacked and the ones getting demonized. We showed you the video of the Hamilton man that was ordered by the city to take down security cameras. Security cameras that Hamilton police were using to catch criminals. But they want it taken down because all of a sudden now it's become a privacy threat. How hilarious that is. Recently, premiers and mayors have pressured the government to overhaul bail legislation. Poilievre said he hears from police officers who are exhausted by arresting the same people over and over again. Responding in the House of Commons, Liberal MP Kevin Lameau guaranteed the government would introduce its own bail legislation this fall. Lameau said Prime Minister Mark Carney has made a solemn pledge to commit to bail reform. He argued conservatives continue to discuss crime because it's an issue that drives fundraising, calling it a cash cow. Really? How long are they just going to go with this? Oh, they're just criticizing so they can get, donors, so they can get more money into their camp. As if that's not an actual serious problem, and everybody from the left and the right and the independent and the NDP and the Green Party and the Bloc Québécois are all frustrated by this. It's happening all over the place. But no, they want to try to make this a partisan issue. They want to try and separate and sow division on solving the crime situation. Why? Because chaos thrives the establishment. They want the parliament separated. They want us separated. They want criminals on the street to cause mayhem, to cause havoc, so that the billionaire occupiers that truly run Canada and a lot of the Western countries can implement their soulless, heinous agenda against us. keep us distracted, keep us divided, keep us paranoid so that they can rule and conquer over us. So this was brought to attention. Again, conservatives drafted the 3 strikes crime law bill, and it was brought to a vote in the House of Commons. So the real Mr. Bench says the Liberals just voted to keep violent offenders on the streets of Canada. So here's the video here. You can see already the yeas get it. The yeas are at 139 and the nays get at 189. So they voted on this 3-strike law and the nays got it. They're saying, no, we're not going to do this crime bill legislation. We're not going to do bail reform. So we're going to keep the crisis going. And here's what went down in the House of Commons on that.
The question is as follows. Mr. Brock, seconded by Mr. Mahal, moved that given that the Liberal government has changed the law to allow for house arrest for serious offenders and lets repeat criminals go free within hours of their arrest, which has resulted in a 50% increase in violent crime, the House call on the Liberal government to replace these changes with a 3 strikes you're out law that will stop criminals convicted of 3 serious offenses from getting bail, probation, parole, or house arrest, and keep violent criminals in jail for at least 10 years.
So they just told you what the bill they were voting on, and 189 votes went to no. 189 votes went to no. And I can tell you, just based on that number, that is not all just the Liberals. That is all not just Mark Carney's camp there. That there was definitely some NDP votes. There was definitely some Green Party votes. Possibly Bloc Québécois. Who exactly knows what individual voted on this? But 189 voted to not have this bill. To not go with the 3 strikes law. Which, okay, you're allowed to have your opinion. You're allowed to say that, I don't agree with all the terms of, what Pierre Poilievre is suggesting, what the Conservatives are drafting. But where's your reforms? Where's your bill? Because we can all agree that crime is a problem in this country. Crime is a crisis in Canada. And since I don't see any other drafts, I don't see any other notions to crack down on crime, to deal with this in an appropriate manner, to make the streets safer, to make it more wholesome, to make it more inviting for people to come to Canada, because let's face the facts. This crime spree is not only affecting Canadians, it's affecting tourism. Who's going to come to Canada when there's home intruders breaking into houses frequently, when people can't self-defend themselves, when there's crazy maniacs, stabbing and causing homicides in Toronto? Who's going to come to the city? Who's going to come and travel and tour around, knowing that our country is a spree of lunatic criminals that are not dealt with in an adequate way? So they voted down 189 votes. This notion to deal with repeated offenders. And again, you can have some disagreements on this. You can disagree that, the 3 strikes law maybe not the best approach, but where's your draft? Where's your conclusion? Where is your ability? What's your resolution onto combating crime? Because at least the Conservatives are drafting something. Liberals been in power for over a decade. They haven't done squat. Have not done squat. Which makes this all very, very angersome to the average Canadian that has to deal with this day in, day out. So here, this guy, Ned Cruick, who's an MP, I think he's for Hamilton, Conservative member of Parliament for Hamilton East and Stony Creek. And I bring him up, particularly in that riding. It's good to mention this riding because, as we saw in a previous video that we covered, the child, fan of the playground, if you will. I gotta be careful how I word this because, YouTube. How a violent repeater of Peter files and fans of the playground breaking into a home in Welland, Ontario, which is just south of there, and attacking a 3-year-old girl. This is a repeated offender that recently just went to a St. Catharines courthouse to get another bail hearing once again, because this is a multiple repeated offender. And he's going to the courthouse to get another provision of bail. So this MP, who's seen how horrific crime is in Hamilton, how horrific crime is in Southern Ontario, just like Toronto, just like anywhere elsewhere in this country, and he is shocked and stunned by the outcome of this vote. And here's what he had to say.
Breaking news
about it.
We just got defeated on a motion by the Liberals, the Bloc, and the NDP. This was a motion set out by MP Larry Brock on bail reform, specifically a 3 strikes and you're out for violent offenders and repeat violent offenders, to deny them bail. This is a shame. Clearly, the Liberals are not listening to their constituents, and they're not listening to Canadians. Breaking news. We just got defeated.
They're not listening to their constituents, and they're not listening to Canadians. So who are they listening to? Because I don't know who this is for. I don't know what Canadian would be okay with this, no matter where you are in this country. I don't understand how anyone could be excited or cheering or just ignoring this crisis and pretending it's not a big deal. Unless you're some sort of, billionaire investor or some globalist that has no ties or tension or has no residency in Canada and doesn't really care how bad the streets are. That just wants, criminals to run amok because it's good to their hideous agenda. I don't know what the case could be. But the fact that majority of this country, whether you voted for Pierre Poilievre or Mark Carney or the Bloc or Green Party, no matter who you vote for, all these people can see how disastrous the country is, how disastrous our crime is getting. I follow a lot of the Toronto Crime Watch on X. It's a very good account because it lists in detail all these different instances that are happening around the GTA. And it is just shocking. It's just shocking that you could see hour to hour to hour of so many crimes taking place, so many horrific, violent, aggressive attacks on people, that it's become so common that even in our family, and it sounds morbid to say this, but even our family, we kind of joke about it, that anytime you turn on Toronto news, we play this little game of what are the first 3 headlines? Is it homicide, gang violence, or grape? Again, I gotta watch what I say because of YouTube. But we play that little game because just how common, how frequent it's become. And that used to be something I would look at the States. Like, I would make fun of places like Detroit and say, oh, that's, it's a crime spree hellhole and stuff like that. Now it's happening here. And apparently not a lot of politicians are willing to even address this. And I don't know why. I don't know why. What's the conclusion of this? Why do you vote against this? Not have your own draft or your own ways to deal with the crime spree. Why are you refusing to acknowledge this? What's in it for you? How does this benefit people? Because I can name a bunch of Canadians that are not happy with this. Definitely not happy with this. As we're seeing more and more crimes being taken about and more violent repeaters being thrown back onto the streets. And we're not dealing this in an adequate, safe way that's good for our country, that's good for our children, that's good for anybody. I mean, the fact that Toronto police have to come out and say that, hey, you can't self-defend yourself, or there's so many car break-ins that you just might as well give the keys to the criminals. Just give them your car, because we can't do anything. There's nothing we can do. Excuse me? We pay your taxes. You're the one in uniform. You have ammunition. You have a gun. You have tasers. What the hell do you mean you can't do anything? If you can't do anything to crack down on crime, what is the point of you as a police officer? So that's the frustration here. That's the frustration here, and it's a very sad moment that not a lot of people in Parliament respect you enough to understand a serious problem like violent repeated criminals on your streets that are causing mayhem and just glorifying the ability to live sustainably in this country. How gross that is.